It's AOC versus Elon Musk. Yes, again. This time, it's over immigration. Musk tweeted Thursday that the Democratic Party goal is to import voters. AOC then fired back last night, "You are literally an immigrant." I guess a little bit of a zinger there from AOC. A lot of people were pointing out that Elon Musk is referring to illegal aliens that are perhaps being imported by the Democrats versus legal immigrants. And she said that it doesn't matter because seeking asylum is legal. I would argue against AOC that the way a lot of illegal aliens are seeking asylum is not legal. You're supposed to present at a port of entry or declare in a safe third country. You're not supposed to just cross over the border, and then if you happen to get caught by border agents, you throw your hands up and say, "Oh, no, I'm here to claim asylum," and then you get, a court date, you get released into the country. I think that's one of the biggest problems with why we're not able to effectively vet and process these cases the way that we're supposed to, because we're not following the typical port of entry process that is laid out in the law. But AOC and Elon Musk just have been sort of going at each other's throats for quite some time. This is probably the 6th or 7th battle that they've had spilling out on Twitter. They both obviously have really big platforms. And I don't know, it's kind of cute. I kind of like the little jabs they throw at each other.
I love the memes that it's all based on them having a crush on each other. I find them quite funny. I don't know if that's really what's happening. AOC seems to be happily engaged. Elon Musk seems to be unhappily divorced. Who knows the feelings between the two for each other that are romantic. But I am confused as to how are they illegal immigrants if then they would have a green card? Wouldn't that then make them legal immigrants if they have a green card?
I think he's referring to the fact that they're giving amnesty or green cards to people who cross the border illegally as opposed to going through the legal green card process. Or attempting to give them green cards at least.
Yeah, I think, it makes sense that they have some way of being processed if they're already in the country and they came in illegally to get them in the working world and officially, employed legally in the United States. Then they're paying their full amount in taxes. We have a lot of illegal immigrants who also pay their fair share in taxes. I just want to say that a lot of times, you have people living and working in the United States who are not fully documented immigrants that do pay more taxes than legal American-born working people. But I think it does make sense to have them officially become a part of the country. If they are living here, they should be working here. They should be paying taxes here. So I don't know. It seems to me that what we've seen in terms of economic growth over the last couple of years, a decent portion of that can be credited to growth because we've grown the workforce through having, migrant workers, not talking about the Taiwanese immigrants coming in to work under the CHIPS Act, but people that are coming here to start a life here. I think it makes sense that they have a path to citizenship, even if they didn't cross the border legally. A big reason why migrants don't do this is because of the timely nature it takes to be processed at the borders, because of the increase in migrants being held in detention facilities. I think, avoiding that is kind of a natural human calculation. Should we have policies that, have more legal ports of entry, have more investment in processing these migrants? Absolutely. So this doesn't happen in the future. But it seems to be a policy decision around, well, what do we do now? And I think making sure people, if they're going to be here anyway, are at least legally integrated into the society. We have a record of them. They can work and be productive participants of our society as well.
I think that's unfair to people who do go through the legal process, though, because they spend sometimes a decade trying to get citizenship. It's obviously not super easy to get even just a green card. And so when you reward and incentivize people essentially skipping the line, that just seems fundamentally unfair, and also like you're only overloading the process that's being significantly delayed at the southern border even more by convincing people that if they do make it into the United States, they're not only going to be allowed to stay, but they're going to get a work visa. They could eventually get legal status. Right now, in places like New York, illegal aliens are getting $500 visa gift cards monthly, which is more than some tax-paying American citizens get. And that just seems very perverse to me. And there is a process for people, again, to get green cards if they are working in an industry that is understaffed by American citizens. There's seasonal visas available for farm laborers. I mean, all of these things already exist. And I don't think the excuse that it's too difficult to do it that way is really fair, especially when we have millions of people here who did do it the right legal way. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing Hispanics break towards the former president, Donald Trump, because a lot of them have expressed the sentiment that they don't like what's going on with the border crisis under Biden. And they feel like, I did it the right way. I don't want someone else to take advantage of the U.S. not enforcing its border policy to be able to do what I did in 10 years in maybe a year or two, because they decide to give blanket amnesty and essentially reward them for disrespecting and breaking our nation's laws. Now, on the economic front, it is true that the U.S. GDP continues to grow every year, but my politics are just not really centered on whether or not the GDP is growing. I think there's a lot more that goes into having a stable nation and a stable economy besides just whether or not our economy is getting bigger. I think right now we have an amazing opportunity to allow American citizens the opportunity to organize and ask for and demand higher wages, better benefits, because we have this tight labor market. And what big corporations are doing is they're taking advantage of what's happening at the border to allow these illegal aliens to work for them, to lobby for the U.S. government to give them work visas, because they want to be able to have cheaper labor than what they're getting from American citizens. So really what you're doing is undercutting the American worker with what is effectively an illegal immigrant scab who is working for much lower wages. Sometimes they're working under the table, which means they don't pay taxes on their income, and they're not getting benefits either. So I don't think this is good for either party, because you're basically having a two-tiered economy where you have either illegal workers or workers who are here illegally and have a work visa, being able to go in for a very low wage. Maybe they're working for minimum wage, they're not getting benefits. And then you have American workers who are solely going to get priced out of the workforce because they're going to be considered too expensive. There's not a single industry in the entire United States that is a majority immigrant labor, including farm work. And even in farm work, only about 2% of the workers there are illegal aliens. And so I think it's a misconception from a lot of people that there's this idea that there are jobs that Americans won't do, and so therefore we need to import immigrants to do it. I think there are a lot of jobs that Americans will be willing to do if they were compensated fairly.
I think that's precisely why we need some kind of green card or work visa policy to process the migrants that have already come and are living in the U.S. as undocumented immigrants and undocumented workers. What we have right now is a lot of people being paid less than minimum wage because they don't have documentation, because they don't have, a work visa, green card. And so they're allowed to be paid below minimum wage simply because they're not a legal worker. If they were a legal worker, if they did have a green card, the employer would be required to give them the benefits of other employees, at least minimum wage. And so I think this is actually a good policy for the workers that are being undercut by workers that are undocumented, willing to work for below minimum wage. Companies will hire them because it's cheaper rather than hire, the American workers who are here, who are required to be paid a minimum wage. Making those workers legal brings everyone up to the same playing field wage-wise. I do think a policy like this, though, should be met with additional investment in processing migrants coming over the border so that there isn't this sort of incentive for people that are coming, that are fleeing all kinds of different humanitarian crises in Latin and Central America, literally risking their lives to get into the United States. They're going to try and get here whatever way they can. And so I think if we had more processing centers and more border security where we didn't want people to cross over illegally, people to direct them to the legal processing centers, I think that matched with a policy that deals with the people that are already here makes the most sense. And to your point about Elon Musk saying they're importing voters, what you said about Hispanics breaking for Donald Trump, it makes a lot of sense. When you have the Latino vote sort of taken for granted by the Democrats, that's actually not something that reflects reality. We do see Latinos breaking in either direction politically. So this whole they're importing voters thing, I don't find to be true in the data.
There's another element to that I think is kind of underreported, which is that when you do have an influx of illegal aliens, and they generally do go to blue cities or states because they have sanctuary laws where the local police do not cooperate with ICE, they obviously don't carry out deportations at all, then you end up actually, for the purposes of the census, allowing potentially down the road them to have more representation in Congress, that is those localities or states to have more representation in Congress, because they're going to have a population boost from the illegal aliens that are coming. So that's another element of the idea of importing voters, is not just that the illegal aliens might eventually be able to actually vote in elections, but they're also important for the process of proportioning representatives as it comes to federal, state and federal elections. I think I would wonder when the cutoff is, though, for giving work visas to, or amnesty to, illegal aliens who are already here, because we have about 12 million right now. The U.S. workforce is about 167 million. It doesn't seem like we have any of the infrastructure or a stable enough economy to just give work permits to all of those people and expect that it's not going to be a huge detriment to the American worker and to the economy writ large. And that's without even mentioning, of course, the current housing shortage that we're facing, where rents are skyrocketing. A lot of people are incapable of finding an affordable single-family home, and they're now having to turn over some of their resources to the illegal aliens that are coming when they paid taxpayer money for their ability to have assistance from their government, to use community centers, to use schools, and they're now being used and to stay in hotels, and they're now being used to house all of these illegal aliens, further driving up housing costs for the average American. Now, in addition to all of these economic and housing concerns, we also, of course, have the issue that the people who are being processed are not properly vetted, because we don't hold them in detention centers while we do a background check and find out if there's a warrant for their arrest in their home country, or find out if there's some connection to gangs. And so what we've been seeing over the past couple of years is that some gangs from places like Venezuela and El Salvador are actually coming into the U.S. and establishing gang centers here with the purpose of sending earned money that they get from their criminal activity back to the local gangs in their home countries. Perfect example of this is what's been happening in New York with Trendel Aragua, where they have basically been running this crime ring where they ride around on mopeds and scooters, and they steal phones out of people's hands, and they transfer money out of their bank accounts or via their Venmo and Zella, and then further sell the phone overseas for an additional profit, and then send the money back to Venezuela. MS-13 has been operating in places like Northern Virginia, Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, and Long Island in New York for quite some time, and are known for their really brutal, violent acts of initiation. There's been a number of cases over the past just couple of weeks of Americans being raped and murdered by illegal aliens, and also other migrants being raped and murdered by people that they have been housed with. That was an example that happened up in Massachusetts, where a 15-year-old disabled girl was raped by a fellow illegal alien who was staying in the hotel with her. And so from a humanitarian standpoint and from a national security standpoint, we need to be doing a better job of making sure that we're not letting in criminals. And when you allow people to overrun the border to the point that we're just processing, releasing, our government doesn't have the opportunity to do that. And that's such a disservice to the American people, who expect that their government, if there's anything that they're in charge of doing, if there's anything they pay taxpayer dollars for, it's to protect them, to have public safety.
Yeah, I think that pays credence to the policy of making sure that there are more personnel and more processing facilities on the border, because it already is a law that you cannot become a citizen in the United States. You cannot migrate to the United States if you have, certain criminal records. And so that's already a law that is in place. It's not enforced because there really has been a lack of investment in the southern borders facilities that are responsible for processing migrants. And so the situation that we have now is, with really sparse investment, you have large parts of the border where people are crossing to avoid the long processing times. The solution to that is just more people on the border, ensuring this doesn't happen. I think the majority of people crossing into the United States, the data reflects this, are not criminals. They are people coming here for a better life who are willing to work honestly. And a situation where you have a policy that allows them to be legal workers in the United States, they will be counted as a part of the unemployment unemployment rate, which will be reflected in the federal government's numbers, especially the Federal Reserve's numbers. When we think about central bank policy, we could see a situation where interest rates are brought down. The economy is created, and economic policy, especially monetary and fiscal policy, is designed in a way where it's adjusted according to what the working population is. And so we've been in a period of very high interest rates. If we do see immigration policy going in the direction of increasing the amount of green cards, and I'm sure this is a part of the Biden administration's discussion around what to do about migration, is to have a time of lower interest rates if we are increasing the available working population so that things are in balance. So there are a lot of things we could do to adjust the economy to take in a larger amount of workers. Of course, the growth should be sustainable, not just GDP growth for the sake of GDP growth, and that figure is reflective rather of profits reaped by corporations rather than wages paid out to workers. There needs to be balance there as well, of course, but that's a problem that exists in the economy independent of migration. But there are adjustments they could make. So whatever policy they come up with, I'm hoping it's a comprehensive one. I think Elon Musk intentionally simplifies it and makes it bad for his audience.
Yeah, I wonder if there would be ever at any point a limit to how many people we could take on under this sort of process and release sort of direction, because right now, even with just 200,000 coming across every month, it's been quite unsustainable, and not just from a border processing perspective, but also just from the ability of localities and cities and states to absorb the influx of these individuals. Even states that are getting emergency assistance from the government, who should have the infrastructure available to take these people in, they're clearly not able to do it, and it's causing a massive crisis both at the southern border and then here in the United States. I would say that it's reasonable to want to have some immigrants to come to the United States, particularly ones who are the best and brightest from around the world, to come and contribute to the United States economy. I think it makes sense to have some immigrants come and fill in gaps where they might exist within the labor market. But I want people coming here who respect our borders. I want people coming here who respect the law and respect this country enough to do it the right way through the legal process. And as a country with a border that is sovereign, we should also have enough respect for ourselves that we don't make this just a landing center for anybody who wants to come here. Because, I mean, by that logic, frankly, there would be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people from around the world who would come to the United States. We're the best country in the world. We have the largest economy. A lot of people want to come here. And saying that because you live in Venezuela or Honduras and happen to be able to walk up to the border that you get first pick doesn't seem like exactly the right process to me. Not to mention, we're also being taken advantage of right now by Chinese nationals and others who have the ability to fly to the other side of the border from the south and the north and then come across and take advantage of us that way. I want to prioritize people who are going through the right process and not reward people who immediately enter this country by disrespecting us, by breaking our laws.
Yeah, very interested to see what the Biden administration comes up with. We did see, bipartisan bills pass through the Senate, which we haven't seen in quite some time, but I think we're going to need something far more comprehensive that takes into consideration the long-term economic effects of migration, but also, how much this is a consequence of American foreign policy, that at this point we are reaping what we've sown in destabilizing a lot of countries across Latin and Central America. That's created conditions where people who have lived in these countries for generations now see them as uninhabitable. And so I think the United States is going to have to consider their role in creating the migrant crisis and really take responsibility in coming up with a solution for this, because migration's an issue all around the world. It's more of a human issue than it is the issue of any country. That people cross borders, people in the United States leave and move to other countries. But I think this is the kind of situation where we're going to have to treat the issue of migration with the same responsibility we move forward with foreign policy with our neighbors in Latin and Central America. We're going to have to leave this one here. We'll be talking about migration a lot more on Rising, more after this.